By the late 1700s, Charleston was a global center of capital. Its high society and massive fortunes made it one of the world's wealthiest places. Looking at this aerial view of the Lowcountry shows the harsh reality of the region's start. 50 years before that peak of wealth, this was a hostile and malarial marsh. English settlers arrived from Barbados in 1670, bringing a ruthless plantation mindset but zero knowledge of how to farm this specific waterlogged environment. Early South Carolina possessed the ambition for an elite economy, but the colonists lacked the environmental understanding required to build it. The colony survived its first decades through messy, short-term extraction. They shipped out deerskins and naval stores, like pine turpentine and wooden masts for English ships. They also generated capital through a violent human trade, capturing Native Americans and exporting them as enslaved labor to the Caribbean. This extraction economy proved unstable. The constant slave raids and resource conflicts provoked the Yamasee War in 1715, an uprising that nearly destroyed the entire colony. The Lords Proprietors, the 8 nobles who owned the province, realized the colony would collapse without a scalable, reliable cash crop. South Carolina's reliance on violent extraction forced a desperate pivot toward agriculture as the only path to long-term survival. Planters eventually settled on 2 breakthrough crops suited for the swampy environment: rice and indigo. This technical illustration shows the multi-step indigo process. Enslaved laborers managed specialized fermentation vats and used river water to extract the blue dye before placing it on drying racks for export. European colonists faced a massive knowledge gap. They had no expertise in growing rice on a massive scale in a tidal environment. To fill that gap, planters used the transatlantic slave trade to specifically target captives from the rice coast of West Africa. Planters actively extracted specialized agricultural engineering and intellectual property, purchasing captives for their technical expertise rather than just their physical labor. This diagram shows the scale of the terraforming. Enslaved Africans dug miles of irrigation ditches through snake-infested swamps to create a vast geometric layout of earthworks and dams. The system relied on the trunk, a specialized wooden tidal lock built directly into the dams. These locks were timed with the ocean tides to push fresh river water up and over the fields. The system could also be reversed, using the receding tide to drain the fields completely dry for harvesting, while keeping the destructive saltwater out. Enslaved West Africans designed and operated this entire system as a massive, tidal-powered agricultural machine. The immense labor required to run this rice machine drove planters to import enslaved Africans at a staggering rate. By 1708, this surge in imports made South Carolina a black majority colony. In this photograph, we see the winnowing process, a West African agricultural practice where a traditional fanner basket separates the rice grain from the chaff. The geographic isolation of these massive labor camps, seen here, led to the preservation of West African customs and the distinct Gullah and Geechee cultures. The operational scale of the rice industry isolated the workforce, fostering a culture that remains distinct and enduring centuries later. White planters took full, exclusive credit for the massive irrigation earthworks that defined the colony's wealth. Planters even compared the irrigation systems to the works of the ancient Egyptians, erasing the West African intellectual property. This created a landscape of fear, as the white minority used psychological terror to maintain control over a massively larger enslaved population. The legislature codified this control in the Negro Act of 1740, a set of draconian laws that stripped the enslaved population of the right to assemble, move freely, or even learn to write. The very architectural and economic success of the enslaved population became the primary motivation for their absolute, brutal subjugation. The growth of South Carolina was a project of forced technological transfer rather than a standard story of European agricultural colonization. The region's immense wealth resulted from the systematic exploitation of human life and specialized knowledge taken from across the Atlantic. The engineering genius of enslaved West Africans terraformed the Lowcountry, building an agricultural empire that remained the state's economic foundation for 2 centuries.